I've spent years helping you, and the moment I needed you, you all let me down. You vanished.
I tested my family on Christmas night. They failed miserably. The smell of roasted turkey filled every corner of my childhood home as I watched my family laugh and exchange gifts around the Christmas tree. My mother, Patricia, sat in her favorite armchair, her face glowing with joy as she opened a cashmere scarf from my brother David. My sister Michelle was on the floor with her kids, helping them tear through wrapping paper with excited squeals. David's wife Amanda was taking photos, documenting what she'd probably caption as perfect family memories on social media. They had no idea that I'd been planning this moment for 3 months. My name is Elena Foster, and up until 6 months ago, I thought I had the kind of family that would move mountains for each other, the kind that showed up when things got hard, the kind that meant it when they said family first. I was wrong. It started with my grandmother's funeral in June. Nana Rose had raised me after my father walked out when I was 7, and my mother spiraled into depression so severe she couldn't function for almost 2 years. While Mom slowly put herself back together, Nana was the one who packed my lunches, helped with homework, and showed up to every school play and soccer game. She was more than my grandmother. She was my parent. When Nana died at 89, she left behind a small house in Queens that needed to be cleaned out, sold, and the proceeds distributed among her 3 grandchildren, me, David, and Michelle. The house wasn't worth much, maybe $300,000 after it was fixed up, which meant about $100,000 each. But it wasn't about the money. It was about 50 years of Nana's life packed into that house. I'd asked my siblings to help me sort through her belongings over the summer. We needed to decide what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. It was going to be emotional and exhausting work. David had been too busy. He had a demanding job as a corporate attorney, he'd said. Weekends were his only time to decompress. Maybe in a few months. Michelle had her hands full with the kids. 3 children under 10, she'd reminded me, as if I didn't know. She couldn't possibly take time away from them to drive to Queens, so I'd done it alone. Every weekend for 2 months, I drove from my apartment in Brooklyn to Nana's house and sorted through a lifetime of memories. I found photos of my father that made me cry. I found my grandfather's war medals in a shoebox. I found every card, every drawing, every school project that Nana had saved from all 3 of us. When I'd tried to share these discoveries with David and Michelle, showing them photos over text, asking if they wanted certain items, I got one-word responses: nice, cool, whatever you think. The realtor had told me the house needed work before it could be listed. New roof, updated electrical, kitchen repairs, about $40,000 worth of work. She suggested we split it 3 ways, get it done quickly, and get the house on the market. I'd asked David and Michelle to contribute their shares. David said his money was tied up in investments and Amanda wanted to renovate their kitchen. Michelle said they were barely making ends meet with childcare costs, so I'd paid the entire $40,000 myself, draining my savings account. The house sold in September for $285,000. After realtor fees and my renovation costs, there was $230,000 left. I'd expected my siblings to acknowledge that I'd fronted the money and deserved to be paid back first. Instead, they'd expected their full third, $76,000 each. Never mind that I'd put in $40,000 and countless hours of physical and emotional labor. When I'd tried to discuss it, David had been dismissive. Elena, you're being petty. Nana left the house to all of us equally. We all get equal shares. That's how inheritance works. But I paid for all the repairs. Which increased the value of the house, he'd interrupted. Which benefited all of us. You don't get extra credit for doing basic maintenance. Michelle had been worse. Elena, I need this money. Do you know how expensive kids are? I can't believe you're trying to take money from your nieces and nephews. That was when something inside me had broken. These were the people who were supposed to love me, who were supposed to have my back, and they couldn't even acknowledge the sacrifice I'd made or the work I'd done. I'd given them their full shares, $76,000 each, leaving me with $78,000 after I'd put in $40,000 of my own money. A net gain of $38,000 for 2 months of emotional devastation and physical labor, while they each walked away with $76,000 for doing absolutely nothing. But what hurt more than the money was the casual dismissal of everything I'd done. The complete lack of gratitude or recognition. The entitled assumption that they deserved equal reward for unequal effort. That was when I'd started wondering, was this who they really were? Or was this just about the house? I'd decided to find out. I'm a social worker, and I make decent money but nothing spectacular. However, 2 years ago, I'd received a settlement from a car accident that wasn't my fault. The other driver's insurance company had paid out $350,000. I'd been smart with it, investing most of it and not telling my family exactly how much I'd received. They knew I'd gotten a settlement, but they thought it was around $50,000. Now, sitting in my mother's living room on Christmas night, I was about to put my family to the ultimate test. I waited until after dinner, after the kids had been put to bed in the guest room, after we'd all had enough wine to be relaxed but not drunk. Then I stood up and cleared my throat. I need to talk to you all about something serious. The conversation died down. My mother looked concerned. David looked annoyed, like I was interrupting his holiday. Michelle just looked tired. I found out last week that I'm being evicted from my apartment, I said. This was a lie, but they didn't know that. The building's being converted to condos, and my landlord is forcing everyone out. I have 60 days to find a new place. Oh honey, that's terrible, Mom said. But you'll find something. The market's tough. But there's more, I interrupted. I also found out that I need surgery. Remember those headaches I've been having? They found a benign tumor. It needs to be removed, but it's not covered by my insurance. The surgery and recovery are going to cost around $80,000. This was also a lie. I'd been having headaches, but they were just stress headaches. I'd been to a doctor who'd confirmed there was nothing wrong with me. The room went very quiet. Elena, that's awful, Michelle said. But there are payment plans, right? Medical financing? I looked into it. The interest rates are predatory, and I need the surgery soon, within the next 3 months, or it could become dangerous. What about the settlement money? David asked. You got $50,000 2 years ago. You must have some of that left. I have about $20,000 left, I lied. The rest went to paying off my student loans and helping Nana with her medical bills before she died. The $20,000 is supposed to be my emergency fund, but now I need it for the security deposit and first month's rent on a new apartment. I'm completely broke. I let that sink in for a moment, watching their faces. My mother looked genuinely distressed. Michelle looked uncomfortable. David's expression was carefully neutral. So I'm asking for help, I continued. I need to borrow money from the family to cover the surgery. I'll pay it back, obviously, but I need it now. How much are you asking for? Mom asked carefully. $80,000 total. I thought we could split it between the three of you. That's about $27,000 each. Like I said, I'll pay it back with interest once I'm recovered and back to work. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, David spoke. Elena, that's a huge amount of money. I don't have that kind of cash just lying around. You got $76,000 from Nana's house 4 months ago. Plus you're a partner at your firm. You make 3 times what I make? And I have expenses you don't have, David said sharply. A mortgage, Amanda's car payments. We're trying to save for the kids' college funds. What kids? I asked. You don't have kids. Not yet, but we're planning to. The point is, my money is allocated. I can't just hand you $27,000. I turned to Michelle. What about you? Michelle was looking down at her hands. Elena, you know our situation. 3 kids, 1 income since I stay home. We're drowning in childcare costs and the mortgage. I want to help, I really do, but we just don't have it. You got $76,000 4 months ago, which went straight to paying down debt and the kids' expenses. It's gone, Elena. I'm sorry. I looked at my mother. She was wringing her hands, clearly torn. Mom? Sweetie, I'm on a fixed income. I have my pension and Social Security, but that barely covers my expenses. I don't have $27,000 in savings. But you could take out a loan, I pressed. You have equity in this house. You could get a home equity line of credit. Elena, I'm 72 years old. I can't take on debt at my age. What if something happens to me? I'd be leaving you kids with my debt. So none of you will help me, I said flatly. I'm facing eviction and major surgery, and none of you will help. We're not saying we won't help, David said quickly. We're saying we can't give you that much money. But there are other ways to help. We can help you find a new apartment, or look into medical financing options. I don't need you to Google things for me, David. I need actual help. Financial help. The kind of help I gave all of you when you needed it. What's that supposed to mean? Michelle asked defensively. It means when you needed a co-signer for your mortgage 3 years ago because your credit was shit? I co-signed. It means when David needed money for his bar exam prep course? I lent him $5,000. It means when Mom needed a new furnace, I paid half of it. It means I spent 2 months of my life cleaning out Nana's house alone and paid $40,000 to fix it up so you could all get your inheritance. We appreciate all that, Mom said weakly. Do you? Because it seems like the moment I need something, everyone suddenly has a reason why they can't help. That's not fair, David said, his face flushing red. You're guilt-tripping us because we don't have tens of thousands of dollars just lying around. That's manipulative. What's manipulative is taking advantage of someone's generosity and then disappearing when they need you, I shot back. The argument escalated from there. Voices got louder. Old grievances came out. David accused me of being a martyr who kept score of every favor. Michelle said I was being dramatic and that her children's needs came before mine. Mom tried to play peacemaker, which just made everyone angrier. Finally, I'd had enough. You know what? Forget it. Forget, I asked. I'll figure it out on my own, like I always do. I grabbed my coat and purse and headed for the door. Elena, don't leave like this, Mom called after me. It's Christmas. Let's not ruin the holiday over money. I turned back to look at them. I'm not the one ruining it. You all did that when you decided your comfort was more important than my health. I left and drove back to my apartment in Brooklyn, shaking with anger and adrenaline. But underneath the anger was something else. Validation. I'd been right to test them. They'd failed spectacularly. Over the next 2 weeks, I got exactly 3 text messages from my family. David, I think you owe Amanda and me an apology for how you acted on Christmas. That was completely inappropriate. Michelle, the kids are asking why Aunt Elena left angry. Thanks for making me explain adult problems to children. Mom, honey, please call me. I hate that we left things like this. I love you. I didn't respond to any of them. What they didn't know was that I'd planned the second phase of my test. I'd created a fake crowdfunding page for my medical expenses, complete with a made-up sob story and a goal of $80,000. Then I'd shared it on social media, but I'd used privacy settings to make sure my family couldn't see it. Instead, I shared it with friends, coworkers, and acquaintances. People who weren't related to me, who didn't owe me anything, who had their own problems and expenses. Within a week, I'd raised $12,000. Small donations, mostly $20 and $50, from people who wanted to help. People who'd read my story and felt moved to contribute, even though they barely knew me. My coworker Sarah, who I'd only worked with for a year, donated $500 with a note, "You've always been there for others. Let us be here for you." My friend Marcus from my gym donated $300. "Kick that tumor's ass. We're rooting for you." Even my elderly neighbor Mrs. Chen, who lived on disability, donated $20. I know what it's like to worry about medical bills. I hope this helps. I sat in my apartment, looking at the donations from near strangers, and cried. Not sad tears, but angry ones. These people, who had no obligation to me, were willing to help. Meanwhile, my family, who'd benefited from my generosity for years, couldn't be bothered. 3 weeks after Christmas, I invited my family to dinner at my apartment. I told them I had important news to share. They all came, probably expecting me to tell them I'd figured out the surgery financing or found a new apartment. Instead, I'd prepared a presentation. When they were all seated in my living room, I pulled out my laptop and connected it to my TV. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "I asked you here because I need to be honest about something." "Elena, if this is another guilt trip about Christmas," David started. "It's not," I interrupted. "Actually, it's the opposite. I need to tell you the truth. I'm not being evicted. I don't need surgery. There's no tumor. I made it all up." The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. What? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "It was a test," I said calmly. "After what happened with Nana's house, after watching you all take your full inheritance without acknowledging the work and money I put in, I wanted to know if you actually cared about me or if you just saw me as someone to use." "A test?" Michelle's face was turning red. "You lied about having a brain tumor to test us?" "Yes, and you failed." "That's sick," David said, standing up. "That's genuinely sick, Elena. Do you have any idea how worried Mom's been?" "Have you?" I asked, looking at him. "Because you sent me one text message in 3 weeks, and it was to demand an apology. That doesn't seem very worried." I clicked to the first slide on my presentation. It showed a timeline of the past 5 years, listing every time I'd helped each of them financially. "David, I lent you $5,000 for your bar prep course. You paid me back $3,000 and then stopped, claiming you'd already paid me everything. I have the bank records proving otherwise. Next slide. Michelle, I co-signed your mortgage. Do you know what that means? It means if you default, I'm legally responsible for your debt. I put my financial future on the line for you. See click. Mom, I paid $8,000 for half of your furnace. But you told David and Michelle I only paid $2,000, so they'd feel less guilty about not contributing. Mom's face went pale. How did you? I talked to the HVAC company. They showed me the invoice. Click. And then there's Nana's house. I spent 60 hours of physical labor cleaning it out. I spent 2 months of emotional labor going through her belongings and reliving memories that broke my heart. I paid $40,000 for repairs. And when it sold, you all expected equal shares. I looked at each of them. So when I asked for help, when I told you I was facing eviction and needed surgery, I wanted to see what you'd do. Would you step up the way I stepped up for you? Would you acknowledge the debt you owed me, not in money but in family loyalty? And we didn't, David said quietly. No, you didn't. Not only did you refuse to help, but you also made excuses, shifted blame, and acted like I was being unreasonable for even asking. Saying click. The next slide showed the crowdfunding page and the donations. This is the really interesting part. After you all refused to help me, I created a fake crowdfunding page. In 2 weeks, I raised $12,000 from acquaintances, coworkers, and near strangers. People who don't owe me anything gave me money because they thought I needed help. I let that sink in. Mrs. Chen from next door, who lives on $900 a month in disability, donated $20. My coworker Sarah donated $500. These people have their own problems, their own expenses, their own families to support. But they helped anyway. Michelle was crying now. Elena, what do you want from us? You want us to feel guilty? Mission accomplished. You want us to apologize? Fine, I'm sorry. Is that what you want to hear? No, I said. I want you to understand who you are. I want you to see that you're the kind of people who take and take and take. But the moment you're asked to give, you disappear. I want you to know that our relationship has been one-sided for years, and I'm done with it. So what are you saying? Mom asked, her voice trembling. You're cutting us off? You're disowning your family over money? This isn't about money, Mom. It never was. It's about respect, reciprocity, and actually giving a damn about each other. You all failed that test. David stood up, his face hard. You know what, Elena? You're right. You're absolutely right. We should have helped you. We should have been better. But you're not innocent in this either. You set us up to fail. You lied to us, manipulated us, and now you're acting superior because we didn't pass your secret test. At least I know the truth now, I said. The truth is that you're so focused on keeping score that you've turned family into a transaction. David shot back. You want to know why I didn't help? It's not because I don't care. It's because I'm tired of feeling like I owe you. You hold every favor over our heads like a weapon. You make us feel guilty for having needs. And now you've proven that you'd rather test us and prove yourself right than actually communicate like an adult. His words hit harder than I wanted to admit. Get out, I said quietly. Gladly, David said. Michelle and Mom followed him to the door. At the threshold, Mom turned back. Elena, I love you. But your father walked out on us, and now you're doing the same thing. You're walking away from your family because we're not perfect. I hope someday you realize that nobody's perfect, and that includes you. They left, and I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the evidence of my successful test. I'd proven my point. I'd exposed their selfishness. I'd won. So why did I feel like I'd lost everything? The next few months were lonely. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts and volunteering for the most difficult cases. Anything to avoid thinking about the empty space where my family used to be. I donated the $12,000 from the crowdfunding campaign to a real medical charity, with personal notes to each donor explaining what I'd done and apologizing for the deception. Most people were understanding, though a few were angry. Sarah from work stopped talking to me. Marcus from the gym unfriended me on social media. I'd thought proving I was right would feel satisfying. Instead, it felt hollow. 3 months after the test, I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Patricia Lynn was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who didn't let me hide behind my righteous anger. Why did you really do the test? She asked during our 3rd session. To prove they didn't care about me, I said. Did you need proof? Or did you already know, and you wanted to punish them for it? I didn't have an answer. Tell me about your father, Dr. Lin said. What does he have to do with anything? Your mother said you were walking away from family like he did. That seemed to bother you. I shifted uncomfortably. My father left when I was 7. Just packed a bag and walked out. No explanation. No goodbye. My mother fell apart, and Nana had to raise me. And how did that make you feel? Abandoned. Worthless. Like I wasn't enough to make him stay. And when your siblings didn't help you, how did that make you feel? Like, I stopped, the realization hitting me. Like I wasn't enough to make them stay either. Dr. Lin nodded. The test wasn't about proving whether they cared. It was about proving that you were right to protect yourself from being abandoned again. If you could prove they were selfish, then you could leave first. You could be the one doing the abandoning instead of being abandoned. I sat with that for a long moment. So what do I do now? That depends. Do you want to be right? Or do you want to have a family? It was a good question. 6 months after the test, I reached out to my mother. We met for coffee at a neutral location, a Starbucks halfway between our neighborhoods. I'm sorry, I said before she could even sit down. I'm sorry for lying, for testing you, for pushing you away. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Oh, honey, I'm sorry too. You were right that we took you for granted. You were right that we should have helped you. But I was wrong to test you instead of just telling you how I felt. We talked for 2 hours, crying and laughing and finally being honest with each other. Mom admitted that she'd always relied on me because I was strong, because I handled things, because I never complained. She'd failed to see how much I was carrying. I admitted that I'd kept score of every favor because I was terrified of being abandoned again. That I'd tested them because I wanted proof that my worst fears were true, so I could protect myself. What about David and Michelle? I asked. Michelle wants to talk to you, Mom said. She's been in therapy too, actually. Dealing with some postpartum issues she never addressed. David, she sighed. David's still angry. He feels betrayed. He should, I said. I did betray his trust. Reconciling with Michelle took time. We met for lunch, and she apologized for taking advantage of my help over the years. I apologized for the test. We agreed to start fresh, with better boundaries and more honest communication. I need you to know something, Michelle said. After Christmas, after you left, I did try to figure out how I could help you. I looked into taking out a loan. I talked to my husband about dipping into the kids' college fund. We couldn't make it work with the timeline you gave us, but I was trying. You were? I felt tears welling up. Of course I was. You're my sister. I'm not great with money, and I have been selfish, but I do love you. I wish you'd believed that enough to just ask me for real help instead of testing me. She was right. If I'd gone to them with a real crisis instead of a manufactured one, maybe things would have been different. Or maybe they wouldn't have been. I'd never know now. David was the hardest. He refused to see me for almost a year. When we finally agreed to meet, it was at his attorney's office of all places. He'd insisted on neutral ground with a witness. I want you to understand something, he said, his voice cold and formal. What you did was cruel. You made Mom worry herself sick. You made me question every interaction we've ever had. You turned family into a game, and then you acted like you won. I know, I said. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it, Elena. You broke something, and I don't know if it can be repaired. I know that too, I said. But I want to try. If you'll let me. We talked for 3 hours. David told me about how the test had affected him, how it had made him question his own character, how he'd started going to therapy to deal with the guilt and anger. I told him about my therapy, about understanding why I'd done it, about learning that I'd been trying to protect myself from abandonment by abandoning first. The thing is, David said finally, you weren't wrong about everything. I did take advantage of your help. I did take you for granted. And when you asked for help, my first instinct was to protect myself instead of helping my sister. That's on me. But I created a situation where you couldn't win, I said. I asked for an amount of money I knew would be difficult, gave you minimal time to figure it out, and then judged you for not immediately saying yes. That's not fair. No, it's not, David agreed. But it doesn't mean my response was okay either. We're both responsible for where we ended up. We agreed to try to rebuild our relationship, slowly and carefully. No more one-sided favors. No more keeping score. And absolutely no more tests. 2 years after that Christmas test, my family gathered again for the holiday. This time, there were new rules. We each brought one modest gift, we split the cost of dinner evenly, And we'd all been in therapy, learning how to communicate better. The evening was awkward at first. Too polite, too careful. But gradually, we found our rhythm. We laughed at old stories, played games with Michelle's kids, and actually talked to each other instead of at each other. At one point, David pulled me aside. You know what the weirdest thing is? That test, as awful as it was, actually did help. It forced us all to look at ourselves and our relationships. I'm not saying I'm glad you did it, but I'm glad we're here now. Me too, I said. I still think you're kind of crazy though, he added with a small smile. I know, I said, smiling back, but at least I'm self-aware about it now. The truth is, the test didn't reveal what I thought it would. I'd expected it to show me that my family didn't care about me. Instead, it showed me that we were all flawed, all struggling, all doing the best we could with the tools we had. They'd failed the test, yes, but I'd failed too, in different ways. I'd failed to communicate my needs before they became resentments. I'd failed to set boundaries before I felt exploited. I'd failed to give them the benefit of the doubt or the chance to make things right. I'd been so afraid of being abandoned that I'd built walls so high nobody could reach me, and then I'd blamed them for not trying hard enough to climb them. The test taught me that relationships aren't pass-fail. They're messy and complicated, and people will disappoint you, and you'll disappoint them right back. But that doesn't mean the relationship is worthless. It just means it's human. Would I do it again, knowing what I know now? No? I'd handle it like an adult, by using my words, expressing my feelings, and giving people a chance to respond before I assumed the worst. But I can't regret it entirely because it led me here. To a family that's more honest, more boundaried, and more real than the one we pretended to be before. We're not perfect, but we're trying. And maybe that's the best any of us can do. Last week, Michelle called me. Her car had broken down, and she needed a ride to pick up her kids from school. A few years ago, I would have said yes immediately and then resented her for asking. Now, I said, I'm working until 5, but I can help after that. Can you call Dad's brother to help before then? She said yes, and we worked it out together. No resentment, no scorekeeping, just two sisters figuring out a problem. And David? He called me last month for advice on a case he was working on. Not money, not a favor that would cost me anything, just a request for my perspective. We talked for an hour, and at the end, he said, "Thanks, Elena. I appreciate you." It was the first time I could remember him saying that, and I believed him. The test failed miserably, but in failing, it taught us all how to pass the only test that actually matters, showing up for each other, honestly and imperfectly, one day at a time. Let me hear your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more like this.